Welcome back. Today, we're having a conversation with our senior consultant, Kirstie Jackson, all about leadership and specifically leading beyond average. Kirstie, what I would love to talk about today is navigating conflict, managing people, building culture, all of these things, this responsibility that comes with growth in aesthetic medicine. So, diving right into things, what do we mean by an uncomfortable conversation?
Well, this is a great question and one I think we all struggle with. This is a forever struggle, but especially something that is more challenging in the beginnings of our maybe leadership journey. And by leadership, I know we don't always have to mean leading people, but in this case, it typically does. And it is, I call it the ick. It's kind of like when you get that icky feeling in the pit of your stomach and you are kind of avoiding having a conversation, or you know that this is going to be a really tough thing to share with another person, or maybe you're delivering constructive feedback, and you haven't done that with someone before and you're worried that it will go poorly. All of these things can be examples of an uncomfortable conversation, something that is going to make you or the person with whom you're communicating feeling uncomfortable.
Mm.
And I think that we often skip over the importance of training people and nurturing them, growing and developing them, and to teach that this is actually normal. The more we have these uncomfortable conversations, the easier they become. It's one of those practice makes better scenarios. Once you've done one or two of them, it becomes a little bit easier. But that I think is what we typically mean by the uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah. I've got to be honest, I feel a little uncomfortable even talking about the topic of it because as somebody who doesn't really enjoy confrontation or conflict, I can be the first to admit I would prefer to avoid those conversations. So I know you said that it does get easier over time, but if somebody is having their first uncomfortable conversation, how do you suggest that they prepare for that?
Well, I suggest maybe writing some notes is always a good starting point. Keep your brain focused, organized. You don't want the conversation to spiral somewhere where it shouldn't be. You want to keep the focus circled back on the issue at hand or why you're talking to the individual. So initially, when I started doing this, I would write myself a little checklist, a little reminder sheet of these are the points that I need to touch on in this conversation. And I think that that's a really great start. Or find a mentor or practice with someone with whom you trust within your organization. Or maybe it is your manager. You don't have to use the specifics of the conversation that you're going to have in future with the person that you're going to talk to. Don't use specifics, just keep it vague, but maybe practice. And, you know, also keep mentor notes after the fact. What went well in this conversation and why did it go well? And maybe I replicate that as I move forward. I think as you go down that road, you gather like emotional intel, if you will, emotional data, and you kind of learn this method works well. Like, keep being focused works well. Being succinct works well. Saying things kindly and fairly works well. Allowing people to share their frustrations also like gives them, a safe space to communicate back with you. This works well. We may not always like it, but I think the more you get used to how the conversation goes, the easier it does.
Yeah, that's a great point. And having had to push myself into having those conversations, I do agree it gets a little bit easier. And even if I still feel, a little unsettled going into it, knowing that it's the right thing to do, right, and that the outcome. And I always feel better afterwards. Those just reminding myself of that helps me get through that initial discomfort of getting the conversation started. So, not having these difficult conversations often can lead to what we like to call quiet employees, right? Those employees that we notice are just kind of flying under the radar, maybe not overperforming, not totally underperforming, but it's easy to sometimes just maintain the status quo and not lean in and address those issues. So, but what are some things that leaders should worry about most with these quiet employees?
Those were the employees that I personally worried about the most. You might think at face value it's the person that always speaks out or the person that will always advocate for everyone in the room, and they will be the loudest and they will give pushback and they will challenge leadership and authority, sometimes
Mhm.
in good and necessary ways. But as a leader, it kind of makes you pause and stop and maybe have to rethink things. And
Mhm.
okay, we need to address these concerns, and it can just make your life a little more bumpy. And sometimes that's okay. We need that. With the quiet employees, the reason they're quiet is because they have typically given up, or there isn't any energy or desire within them to challenge anymore. Like they're not maybe challenging. Their new policy rolls out and five people are arguing that they don't like it, and then you have one that typically
Mhm.
does but has remained very quiet. That to me implies that there's no skin in the game. They they aren't as invested in the culture or the direction of the organization, and there's just zero pushback. So for me, when I'm not receiving the constructive feedback, when I'm not receiving even pushback from things that people don't like or they just want to challenge, or you know,
Mhm.
I get really concerned about those staff members, because I just think, to me, that might show me that you don't care enough. And it's not because you don't want to, it's because maybe you've checked out, or
Mhm.
you have experienced some kind of burnout or moral injury. And as a leader, someone who is responsible for managing the team, that's on me. That's my responsibility to course correct, to fix. And it once someone is in that phase of being very quiet, usually some kind of decision has been made where they are planning to disengage with the organization or
Mhm.
maybe find a new position elsewhere. And that is really the hardest version of this to correct. We want to correct it really real time as it's happening. We want to hear that, hey, I'm not super happy about this, or hey, I want career growth and progression. So we can work with the employee rather than getting to the point of them being so disengaged and so quiet.
Yeah. I love that you said it truly is the responsibility of the leader to identify these situations and address them. I've heard others say sometimes, well, I have an open door policy. If something's wrong, they need to come to me. And while yes, we certainly do want to maintain an openness so that our team members feel comfortable coming, but it truly is the responsibility of the leader to look out for their team and to proactively identify those situations and then to lean into those conversations. So, I think it's about creating an environment where people feel safe, they feel valued, they feel confident coming to you to have that conversation. And if they don't, that you still are addressing it and calling it out. I was recently speaking with a plastic surgeon who referenced this a pretty massive misunderstanding, and we might not even think this as a leadership thing, but it was a misunderstanding of pricing for their membership service. And he paused and he said, after kind of venting, he said, "But ultimately, it's on me. I must not have communicated it clearly." And I so appreciated that ownership in that moment, that truly being a leader is recognizing that any failure within the team has to be owned at the top. And that's not an easy thing to do, is it?
No, and I think it's not easy to do for a few reasons. The people are the hardest not part, not because people are hard, but it's just because we are fueled by emotions and our own inner working systems, and like for every person that is different. So as a leader, you have to get to learn and understand how to connect and communicate with individuals individually and multiple times over. So that in itself can be a challenge. It's like the human being part of existing. And I think that yeah, it can be very challenging to do. The empathy within that is hard, and we talk about that a lot in leadership too. How being able to have empathy, emotional intelligence, conflict resolution skills. These are things that are typically more advanced. They're learned by doing. You usually get it with a more seasoned leader. And it's challenging. Some people never fully kind of get there and realize that. So I think that's the first part of this, that the people are the hardest part to
Mhm.
connect with often. Um, yeah, it's a challenge. Something that I've always kept close in a leadership role is that leaders aren't simply there to be in charge; they're there to take care of those within their charge. And I've always kind of led with that, just thinking like, how can I take care of this group of humans who all have different needs, different ways of thinking, different emotions? Like, how can we come together and make most sense of this? And when they talk about HR being people operations, being a director of operations, as I know you once were, I can
Well,
definitely see how the two are related.
yes. Well, and something that you and I both have commonly seen in many practices are really good employees who are excellent at their job, and then they get elevated into a leadership position with this understanding: if you're excellent at doing the job, you'll be excellent at leading other people to do their jobs. And yet, that often doesn't necessarily happen. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen in those situations, and how would we appropriately equip somebody to move into a leadership role?
I think it's just simply it's overlooking the skill set and impact that being a good leader has versus someone who just has the skills to execute the job. And
Mhm.
you are totally right. And funnily enough, I see this a lot more in the sales based role where they're like,
Mhm.
this person is excellent at selling. This person is an excellent, patient care coordinator, for example. We see that role a lot in our world. And because they're great at like talking to the patient and translating that into a sale. And they're so good now. Maybe we're going to have them lead a team of people. And the sales part is great. They knock it out the park. But the leading people, it kind of comes to a grinding halt because they just
Mhm.
don't have the skills. And yet the assumption is from a business owner or organization is like, well, because you are great at your job, you can teach other people to be great at their job too.
Mhm.
Yes, you might have the skills to execute the tasks in an amazing capacity, but you have to be able to translate that well to others. You have to get others excited. You have to have
Mhm.
buy-in. They have to trust you. All of these things come with being in a leadership role. And sometimes I think it's a very easily missed area of opportunity where people are just, you're great. We need to promote you. Maybe it's that person that's asking for more money, or, I want to grow within my job role. And without thinking through strategically, they're like, yes, I'm going to. You can lead a team of people, and that's how we're going to validate paying you more. But actually, I'm not giving you any tools to be a good leader within that capacity.
Yeah, I've reflected on this a number of times throughout my career of, what really makes a good leader, and how does one learn how to become a good leader? And I think it's multifaceted. I do think there is some innate level of skill set or predisposition that some people have. There certainly is formal leadership coaching that you do and that our team does, as well as lots of programs out there. Eh, But I can't help but think of the advantage I've had by having a few really excellent leaders modeling it for me. And to me, that ties into culture. I've worked for some great organizations in the past prior to moving into consulting, where I had strong leaders who demonstrated what that looked like, what it meant to inspire, encourage, hold accountable, to help myself and my other team members grow. And I know that not everybody has the benefit of that, but I think it's a reminder that culture itself doesn't just happen. It's not just low hanging fruit. So, how does an aesthetic practice build strong culture within their practice.
Yeah, I've actually done a very deep dive on this because culture, as you correctly say, culture is not low hanging fruit, although I have heard people describe it as such.
Mm.
I think at face value, you might think that there are quick fixes that you can make, but it is like a giant tree with really deep roots, and the roots are your culture. And so, in order to fix that, you have to kind of do the really deep dive. And it's about systems, it's about not creating systems. If you create a system that your staff cannot feasibly sustain well or execute to the standard that you need it to be executed, then you've likely built a model for burnout, not for business growth and development. And that goes for your culture too. So just as we think about strategy for business, which we love to do, where we go to these conferences and we hear lecture after lecture about how we grow and develop our business, how we keep a healthy P&L, how we streamline our operations. And we don't really talk about how to strategically define our culture. For me, it goes right back to baseline. You have to have a plan for it. This is not going to be the owner brings in pizza on a Friday and yay, don't we have such a good culture? No, this is creating an environment where the staff feel emotionally safe. The
Mhm.
staff feel that they can share their grievances and concerns with their leadership team, where they feel valued and appreciated. So, I mean, some of that might relate into how you are paying or compensating them. But studies currently show that it's definitely more than a paycheck. It goes beyond what you pay them and into flexibility, lifestyle. People want to work hard. Employee engagement surveys will show typically that your employees come to work wanting to give 100% every day.
Mm.
Um, so we're going to assume that that is true. And but then they don't want their work necessarily to filter into every waking, living, breathing moment of their life. They want that definition of church and state, if you will. So I think culture goes all the way back to having a strategy for that. How are we going to deliver this to them? Which is really, really hard in this world
Mhm.
because we deal with patients and we deal with patients IRL and they're in front of us. And so giving people, oh yeah, have a work from home day today. That's not so easy in what we do. I think we have to think creatively, and largely I see healthcare in particular as being a little bit behind the curve here because we have our own set of obstacles to creatively think around in order to deliver this better work-life balance. And I also think there's a really big lack of true leadership expertise. I've seen some studies and some data come in where med spa aesthetic clinics nationwide have been surveyed, and uh, the compensation alignment between how we're paying our clinical staff and how we're paying our administrative staff, and is vastly different, and it's much more inconsistent in the administrative area. I also think that this is my like future trend alert. I think that as we move forward, the best aesthetic practices that we see will be the ones that do prioritize operational excellence in addition to clinical excellence and revenue generation. Those are going to be the ones that I think that we start to see excel and do really well and great, because likely they've employed someone who has the experience, who understands what foundationally building a good culture for the business should look like, and is able to deliver and execute on that. And it's really hard.
It is hard. And I think about the dozens of practices that we've helped open, or the dozens of practices we've worked with that are fairly new, and it's a very small team, and that's pretty normal, especially in aesthetics, right? That we have often a single provider, whether it's a physician or a nurse practitioner or PA, whoever that primary provider is, and sometimes one employee, sometimes two, but a very small team, which results in everybody wearing multiple hats.
Mhm.
And it's the owner who is the de facto manager slash leader, as well as, again, that primary clinician, and, providing patient care. And that can be really tough. I mean, the reality is in a small team, we do have to wear all those hats. But it takes, I think, even more intention and thoughtfulness about how to, because you can't exactly compartmentalize. We have to wear all the hats simultaneously. But how do we give equal attention to those different areas and not just think about patients or not just think about what's on my P&L and the business side of things, but that there's equal attention given to that leadership.
Yeah, it's super hard. Having worked in a practice that his is both small, and ultimately I ended up in a practice that was on the larger side, but I've seen it through various different versions of that, and you're totally right. And I will always have empathy for the working manager that's wearing multiple hats. I think that the biggest strength that we can get in those moments is through the communities that we build. Aesthetic medicine does do that really well. It has a very strong community.
Hmm.
And I think once you have the confidence to reach out and make friends and, find organizations or support systems, like whether that be a consultant like us, or just local practices in the local area that have a little meet up once a month, or maybe the business sends you to a conference for your area of specialty or just for aesthetics in general. Make friends, find people that are doing similar things to you. It's very true when we say that we want to elevate everyone within the room. For the most part, I find that to be very true in this industry, and it's one of the things I love about it. But we want to see everyone successful, and what one practice might be doing really well, another might be struggling with, or one might be at a different growth phase of, oh, we're just about to bring on our first energy-based device, and someone else might be able to say, oh, we did that 3 months ago, and this is what went great for us, and this is what went it was our area of opportunity and what we could have done better. So I think making that community, and even in the absence of maybe having an immediate mentor or the practice being smaller, try and your reps can be helpful, the community can be helpful, conferences can be helpful, engage in the services of consultants can be helpful. But there is support out there should you need it.
Yes. I love that, so much, and it has occurred to me, I've had many conversations recently at conferences that the value of going is equally the education, the formal presentations and things that are happening on the stage, but just as important are those relationships and that community and the hallway conversations and the just sharing of, "This is what's going on in my practice," and just getting encouraged and inspired by others who are walking that same journey with you.
Yeah. That was honestly for me, it was interesting when people talk about, oh, their mentors or people that they've had in their career. And when I first started out, I worked in very small practice. So it was just the physician owner who was largely absent or operating or somewhere else, and you just kind of had to figure things out alone. But as I started to go to conferences and push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit. And then I started all these speakers that I respected or were like, wow, I'm really inspired by you. And I'm like, that's what I have to do. I have to be around the people who maybe have done this before or who challenge me or who inspire me to be a better leader. And that is how I'm going to uh, grow and learn through these struggles that I might personally be having in my journey too. So that definitely was true for me. And I would not be the person I am today without it. So
That's right. That's right. Well, I love that this is an industry, a specialty that is so open to community and sharing. It makes it all just incredibly fulfilling along the way. So, well, that is all the time we have today, Kirsty. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation about leadership. I look forward to our next one.
thank you so much.